The restaurant, too brightly lit for comfort, became a diorama of secrets beneath the languid sweep of the ceiling fan. A slow, methodical churn that never quite dispelled the sultry tension. At table 3, the man in the straw hat, whose garish pink shirt marked him like a warning flare, methodically tore his dosa, fingers pausing at intervals to brush invisible crumbs from his plate, as if searching for micro-evidence. The water jug at his elbow wore a fingerprint smudge that hadn't been there moments before, its condensation dripping quietly onto a napkin folded into a triangle. Folded, Dr. Henric Lume would later note, not by habit but by intent, the crease aligning with the faint watermark of the eatery's emblem. A subtle nod to a code only true locals remembered. Glenna V, ensconced in the booth nearest the kitchen pass-through, feigned distraction with her ham radio, her thumb tracing idle arcs over the dial, but her eyes tracked every diner's reflection in the smeared glass of the 7-Up fridge. The light caught on a single droplet of sambar clinging to the pink-shirted man's knuckle, a bead quivering with the weight of things unsaid. "Did you notice the switch?" Glenna murmured, low enough for only Henric to hear, voice threading through the clatter of cutlery and the soft conspiracy of background laughter. He asked for a refill, but the waiter changed the jug twice. Henric's reply was a gentle hum, neither agreement nor denial, but his gaze lingered on the untouched corner of dosa, its edge folded, concealing the torn corner of a receipt. Date, 1947, name, obscured by grease. Somewhere in the kitchen, a laugh spiked too quickly, echoed by the metallic snap of a camera phone shutter. The tableau was set, every detail a possible alibi or accusation, as the first encrypted donation notification glimmered across the detective's phone screen. Rs 1 94738, the year of the murder, the value of a life, and the beginning of the game. The humid air shimmered as sunlight sliced through the restaurant's streaked window panes, illuminating the tableau with an almost forensic precision. A pink-shirted young man, his straw hat askew, leaned casually against the counter, his lopsided grin belying the calculated glint in his eye. Slung around his neck was what appeared to be a camera, but Dr. Henric Lume, never one to trust appearances, noted the way the camera lens had been carefully masked with a smudge of banana, as if disguising the kind of device one would use to surreptitiously document meetings, not memories. "You look too cheerful for a man under suspicion, friend," Henric opined, voice warm but edged as Petros Parley sidled up behind, flashing a wide, disarming smile that seemed to invite confidences but concealed more than it revealed. "Just capturing the spirit of the place, Doctor," replied the pink-shirted stranger, his fingers tracing lazy circles over the camera strap. "A nervous stick, or perhaps code." Glenavy, her gaze flicking from reflection to reflection in the pane, intercepted the exchange with a chirp over her battered walkie-talkie. "Heads up, team! Miyuki just flagged an odd withdrawal at the old library account. Timestamp matches that donation." Petros's affability never faltered, but his eyes darted, first to the jug on the table, then to the crowd outside, dense with tourists and locals whose laughter now sounded a touch too rehearsed. Somewhere in the background, the soft click of a phone camera snapped, freezing the moment in digital amber. The smile on the young man's lips widened, but his words, when they came, dropped into the hush like a pebble into a deep well. "If you're searching for the scroll, Doctor, perhaps you're looking in the wrong sort of light." Above them, the ceiling fan spun on, indifferent, as the real game began in earnest. Every shadow a suspect, every smile a screen for secrets old as the town itself. The sky hung low and bruised above Kanniyakumari as Dr. Henric Lume craned his neck at the foot of the Thiruvalluvar statue, its chiseled visage looming higher than suspicion and twice as inscrutable, the scroll clutched in stone fingers, a silent rebuke to the living below. Wind tangled itself in Glenavy's radio cord as she murmured, "Statues don't hold secrets, but they cast long shadows." Her gaze flickering to the filigree of floral carvings at the monument's base, each petal a potential cipher, each fold in the stone robe a crease concealing messages ancient and modern. Petros Parley, ever the confidant, traced the carved numerals along the pedestal, his thumb pausing at a weathered patch where rain had worn away just enough of the detail to suggest, was it deliberate, the outline of a crescent, a symbol Miyuki Chilworth had flagged in the library's long-lost ledger. "Do you see it, Henric?" Petros whispered, his tone too casual. "History isn't written in books here. It's written in erosion." A gust snapped at Dr. Lume's coat as he pressed closer, the roar of the sea below blending with the distant static of Glenna's radio. "Miyuki, confirm. What was the code in the 1947 receipt's watermark?" There was a pause, then her voice, precise as always, crackled back. "Crescent scroll and a single word, witness." Above them, the statue's stone hand offered the scroll to the wind and cloud, as if daring the assembled sleuths and the restless, watchful crowd beyond to claim the truth before the elements or the guilty swept it away. The courtyard at Vivekananda Rock Memorial swelled with the low, orchestrated hum of a crowd that, to Dr. Henric Lume's seasoned eye, never truly dispersed. Conversations braided and frayed around the black columns, each intricately carved pillar a sentry for secrets both ancient and immediate. The sea, restless and insistent, gnawed at the edges of the memorial's stone foundation as Lady Peaches fanned herself theatrically, her voice carrying just enough to reach Lume beneath the pavilion's shade. "You see how they ascend the steps in pairs?" she murmured, nodding toward the line of tourists, their movements oddly regimented, as though choreographed by some unseen conductor. From his vantage, Lume tracked the pink-shirted stranger weaving deftly through the throng, ostensibly snapping selfies, but his camera always lingering a fraction too long on the reflection in the polished obsidian column, the lens catching more than memory. Glenna, seated on the cool stone, typed furiously on her battered radio, dispatching a coded message to Miyuki. "Subject has deviated from the queue. Note, left hand brushing pocket, possible concealment." Above, the bell of the temple rang, fracturing the moment, petals scattered by a sudden breeze, a child's laughter warping into a shriek as a sprawling family tableau nearly toppled an ornate jug at the foot of the stairs. Lume's gaze flicked to the pattern of footprints in the dust beneath the pillars. 5 pairs, one set leading away from the group, toward the shadowed edge of the courtyard, where Parley Pete, half shrouded in sun and suspicion, waited with a packet clutched tight against his chest. "It's not the scroll we seek, friends," Lume said quietly to Peaches, "but the hand that fears to hold it." The wind gusted, carrying with it the scent of incense, sea brine, and something sharply metallic, a promise perhaps that the next clue would reveal itself not in daylight, but in the shifting shadows where every watcher was also watched. At precisely 2:47 p.m., as the low, cloud-draped sky pressed close over Kanniyakumari's rocky shoreline, Dr. Henric Lume stood beside the restless, slate-colored sea, his coat flaring in the briny wind, a solitary figure among a knot of tourists whose laughter drifted oddly, as if piped in from another world. To his left, Miss Perla Peachley, sun hat afloat atop her meticulously pinned hair, parasol tilting like a question, leaned in with a voice as crisp as new linen. "Henric, do you see? 3 boats, not 2, and the orange one's hull is marked with an old family crest. Parley's, if I'm not mistaken." Her eyes, bright with practiced cheer, flicked toward Petros Parley, who stood at the edge of the group, whistling tunelessly, hands folded behind his back as if shielding a secret. Petros's gaze swept the scene. The young man with the pink shirt now pressed close to the granite balustrade, a huddle of women fussing over a wheelchair as a child darted dangerously near the surf. Henric's attention snagged on the smallest details. A glint of metal at the base of the statue, a tourist's arm raised high, not in greeting but as if signaling to someone unseen out on the water, and the ever-present murmur of Perla's voice looping through the fog of salt and suspicion. "Notice the tide line," she whispered. "It's further in than before. If the scroll was hidden on the rocks, it'll be claimed by the sea before sunset." At that moment, a gust whipped a scrap of paper, part receipt, part map, past Petros's feet, and he stooped, a fraction too quick to retrieve it, only to find Dr. Lume beside him, murmuring, "Every current carries more than it appears, my friend, and alibis are rarely watertight." Behind them, a group photo snapped in the mist, faces blurred, identities barely caught, captured the precise instant when secrets like the incoming tide threatened to wash the evidence clean. The beach at Kanniyakumari, under a sky bruised to a sullen pewter, unfurled in a tableau of suspicion and coded silence. Boats, gaudily painted and stenciled with cryptic names and the year 2021, were arrayed like suspects in a lineup, their hulls daubed with half-erased symbols and tangled nets concealing more than the morning's catch. Dr. Henric Lume, coat flapping against the salt-brined air, moved slowly down the strand, his gaze flicking from a faded crest on the nearest prow to a coil of rope that seemed to have been unraveled, then hurriedly retied by an uncertain hand. "See there, Petros," Lume called quietly, gesturing toward a slip of paper wedged in the gap between hull and sand. "Our scroll may not be adrift at sea, but buried on the shore among yesterday's secrets." Petros Pali, ever the confident, bent to retrieve it, fingers brushing the edge only to pause as a fisherman, face shaded by a battered cricket cap, offered a too innocent smile and began whistling the Swan Lake theme, a tune Chat had earlier flagged as the shadowy antagonist's calling card. Meanwhile, under the sprawling banyan that anchored the fishermen's makeshift assembly, Miss Perla Peachley's laughter drifted over the gloom, her eyes never leaving the pair by the boats. "Henric, kindly do not overlook the obvious," she called, voice light. "Flags in this part of the coast are always flown to mark a warning. Yet look, the blue pennant on that orange hull is at half-mast." As Glenavee's radio crackled with the static of intercepted messages, snatches of Tamil, the same phrase, "the witness waits," looping again and again, Manfred Keene, posted at the far edge of the sand, signaled twice with his walking stick. Lume read the code. 2 quick taps, then a pause. It meant intrusion, a new player. At that moment, the pink-shirted stranger appeared beside the 2021 boat, his hand not on his camera but slipped inside the netting, retrieving a small, scroll-shaped canister. A collective hush gripped the windy beach as Lume stepped forward, the air thick with the scent of brine and unraveling lies. "Sometimes," he intoned, voice pitched for his companions alone, "the only thing the tide cannot wash away is guilt." The shoreline of Kanniyakumari, beneath its shroud of mottled cloud and sea-worn prayer, had the hush of a cathedral at evensong, a hush that was never silence, but a dense tapestry of whispered confessions and secret bargains. Dr. Henric Lume stepped lightly between rows of fishing boats daubed in brash yellows and peacock blues, each hull's peeling paint a palimpsest of old storms and older feuds, his gaze drawn ever upward to the spires of the White Church, whose bell, it was said, tolled only at funerals and revelations. "Oliver," he called softly, not needing to raise his voice above the wind's riddling sibilance. "Have you traced the registration on that orange prow? There's a ledger in the parish vestry. Parley's crest appears next to an untimely donation, dated precisely to the day the witness vanished." Oliver Jevitt, his notebook already bristling with cross-hatched clues, replied with a nervous smile. "The ferry manifest shows 1 ticket uncollected. Someone's keeping their distance, Doctor." From the shelter of a timbered awning, Miss Perla Peachley, sun hat angled like a chess queen in mid-gambit, waved a gloved hand toward the church. "You want to hurry?" she intoned, every syllable a gentle prod. "I saw the pink-shirted stranger slip inside just after the last bell sounded. He was carrying a scroll-shaped canister and glancing over his shoulder as if pursued by every ghost in the parish." Glenavee's voice, thin and urgent, crackled from Lume's radio. "Storm fronts rolling in! Our windows closing!" And, as if to punctuate her warning, a single gull shrieked overhead, its wings slicing the grey air. A sign, or perhaps an alibi, offered by the indifferent sea. The world, for a moment, felt precariously poised between revelation and concealment. Every boat, every steeple, every shadow beneath the overcast sky, a message waiting to be decoded, as Lume and his allies pressed onward, hearts pounding with the knowledge that, in Kanniyakumari, even serenity was a mask for danger. A hush hung over the coast at 5:47 p.m., Kanniyakumari's fabled tip appearing almost preternaturally deserted, as if the landscape itself was holding its breath in anticipation of a final confession. Dr. Henric Lume paused at the crumbling stone wall, half swallowed by creeping vines, his silhouette framed by the sullen sky, the steady percussion of gentle waves masking the tension that curled beneath the calm. Strange, isn't it? How the world seems to empty itself when secrets are about to surface, he remarked, his tone lifted by the faintest note of hope, eyes scanning the undisturbed swath of green and sand for signs invisible to less determined souls. Beside him, Oliver Jevitt knelt to examine a patch of vegetation pressed flat in a spiral. "Look, Doctor, someone's been here recently." The scroll could have been passed hand to hand, hidden in plain sight, with the ruins as witness. Manfred Keene, ever the watchful, tapped the stones with his cane and grinned. "If a ghost were to rise, this is the hour he'd pick. But I'll wager flesh and blood left those marks." A sudden gust tugged at Henric's coat, and with it came a distant metallic rattle. From within the wall's fractured heart, a glimmer of torn paper, corners stamped with the Pali crest, fluttered into sight. Henric's gloved fingers seized it, heart pounding. Our antagonist is clever, but even cleverness leaves a shadow. Above them, the sky brooded, the ruins bearing silent testimony as three figures, detective, assistant, sentinel, stood poised on the threshold of revelation, the pulse of the sea counting down the seconds until the pass would yield its final, reluctant secret. The hush of the wax hall, its air perfumed by old varnish and the faint static of unseen cameras, was so profound that even the footfalls of Dr. Henric Lume and Miss Perla Peachley seemed to dissolve into reverence as they entered the chamber of the Mahatma, where the charkha's silent wheel presided over truths both spun and unraveled. Gandhi's glass-bright eyes, caught forever in contemplative mid-thought, watched the room with the implacable patience of one who has listened to generations' confessions, and it was with a conspiratorial hush that Oliver Jevitt, notebook pressed to his chest, whispered, "The scroll was meant to be found here, Doctor. Look at the pattern on those books behind him, color-coded and one just slightly out of order." Miss Perla, ever gracious, lowered herself into a cushioned chair beside the spinning wheel, her hand hovering over the faded upholstery as if expecting a pulse. "No one disturbs this place without purpose. Someone's already been through here before us. See, the charkha's spindle is dustless, freshly turned." Henric, eyes narrowed, stepped closer to the Gandhi statue, his gloved fingers tracing the subtle groove worn into the wood by countless curious hands, but pausing at a single crimson fiber snagged upon a splinter, a thread almost invisible that matched the lining of the pink-shirted stranger's sleeve. "The final testimony is neither written nor spoken but spun," he murmured, voice trembling with realization. Perla's eyes widened as outside, the swell of distant thunder pressed against the museum's walls, and Oliver, breath-catching, began to decode the bookspine's secret, a message woven into order and disorder, waiting for the detective who could see past the reverence to the very human subterfuge beneath. The young man, Henric, in his now iconic straw hat and rose-pink shirt, the instrument-laden strap across his chest giving him the air of a carnival conjurer, or, more pertinently, a courier of secrets, stood before the lurid, flame-streaked mural, his smile a beacon that belied the tension thrumming beneath the evening's gentle warmth. Miss Perla Peachley, appearing at his shoulder with the unassuming grace of a practiced confidant, lowered her parasol and murmured, "Even the brightest facades burn with old stories, Henric. Do you see how the flames curl towards the shutter's lock?" Glenavy, voice trickling through the tinny speaker at Henric's collar, crackled urgently. "The code from the scroll, let what's hidden behind the fire be revealed, matches the metalwork here. Look for a mark beneath the paint." Obliging, Henric ran his gloved fingers along the scalloped shutter seam, pausing on a faint crescent-shaped indentation, a twin to the symbol found in the church ledger, the Pali family's silent stamp. Footsteps scuffed behind him. Oliver Jevitt, out of breath, thrust a folded slip of paper into his hand. "From the baker's boy, Doctor. He said someone pressed it into his palm with a coin, smelled strongly of kerosene. Henric's pulse quickened as the shutters began to rattle, subtle, deliberate, as though responding to the very touch of his suspicion. The fire in the mural seemed to flicker, painted embers echoing the rising anticipation. Henric glanced at Perla, her encouraging nod grounding him in this moment of revelation. "Everyone stand back," he said softly, his own smile now a mask as much as a promise. "We're about to see whether the past's most cherished secret can survive the light of a new evening." The air was thick with the possibility of justice, and as the shutter groaned upwards, unveiling whatever truths smoldered in its shadow, the cheerful tableau revealed itself for what it was, a staged lull before the final unmasking, every line of color and every echoing laugh heavy with the knowledge that the case's last most human heart would soon be exposed.